Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. My faith in reading souls, once a quiet certainty, shattered that night, fractured by the rain and the truth coiled in the stranger beside me. How fatally blind intuition could be. My name is Ilara. For a year, the gig economy's rhythm had pulsed through my hatchback, a ride-share driver navigating the city's veins. Not a calling, merely sustenance punctuated by fleeting glimpses into other lives. Or so the narrative went before the deluge of that particular Friday. Late October bled across the sky, the rain descending not in drops, but in solid aqueous sheets, smearing streetlights into neon Rorschaches, transforming asphalt into liquid graphite. Hours I'd spent slicing through the slick downtown, a ferrywoman for tipsy collegians and bone-weary suits. Fatigue gnawed, the urge to surrender to home strong, but then the phone chimed. One final fare. The coordinates pointed to the city's frayed edge, near skeletal factories slumbering in rust. An uneasy geography, yet the surge pricing sang its siren song. What harm, I reasoned against the rising tide of apprehension in one last trip? Pulling curbside, a solitary silhouette materialized beneath a sputtering sodium lamp. Tall, etched lean against the gloom, hood drawn low like a cowl, a dark duffel bag tethered to his shoulder. A visceral recoil urged me to accelerate, to vanish back into the rain-streaked anonymity. But a countercurrent, the memory of hasty judgments cast upon me, stayed my foot. Who was I to replicate that unfairness? The locks clicked open. He folded himself into the back, trailing the scent of wet pavement and an indefinable metallic tang. "Appreciate the stop," his voice emerged. A low rumble like distant thunder. Not everyone breaks for shadows out here. A smile, thin and forced, stretched my lips as I met his reflection in the mirror. His eyes, dark pools absorbing the ambient light, held an unnerving intensity. A tremor traced my spine. "No worries," I countered, striving for nonchalance. "Where are we headed?" He dictated an address an hour distant, deep into the hinterlands, far beyond my usual circuit. The fare, though, would be significant. I fed the destination to the GPS, its sterile voice a frail counterpoint to the night's mood, and eased the car back into the flow. Silence descended, thick and palpable, broken only by the wiper's hypnotic sweep and the rain's percussive drumming on the roof. I tried anchoring my focus to the ribbon of wet road ahead, yet I felt his gaze, an unseen pressure, tracking my smallest movement. "So," I ventured, the quiet amplifying my unease, "what pulls someone out to the fringes on a night sculpted for staying in?" The pause stretched, taut and long, making me wonder if the rain had swallowed my words. When he finally spoke, his voice was a sibilant whisper that turned the damp air to ice. "Running," he breathed, "from something ugly." My hands clenched the wheel, knuckles blanching. "Oh?" The syllable escaped, thin and reedy, like... He leaned forward, his proximity unnerving, breath ghosting near my ear. "The law," he confided, the word heavy with implication. Did something unforgivable there hunting. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was certain he could hear. Maintaining a veneer of calm felt like holding back a dam break. What was it? He settled back, a chilling amusement coloring his tone. Why don't you find a shoulder? I'll give you the full picture. Every nerve ending screamed flight. Floor the accelerator, dissolve into the rain-lashed darkness. Leave this man and his poisoned words behind. But the highway stretched desolate, flanked by dripping monolithic trees. No sanctuary beckoned. I don't think that's wise, I stammered, the words clumsy. Perhaps I should just complete the trip. His hand shot out, clamping onto my shoulder with startling force. The grip was iron. Pull over, now! Obedience born of fear guided my hands. The car slithered onto the muddy verge. The instant we halted, he was out, a swift shadow circling to my side. My fingers scrabbled for the lock, a futile gesture. He wrenched the door open, hauling me out into the downpour. I stumbled, landing hard on my knees in the cold mire. Looking up, he loomed above, rain plastering his hoodie to his frame, a wickedly curved knife suddenly alive in his hand, catching the stray gleam of distant headlights. Please. The plea tore from my throat, rain and tears merging on my cheeks. Don't. You don't have to. He crouched, the blade hovering near my face, its proximity a cold promise. But necessity dictates, he murmured, the tone almost gentle, a terrifying dissonance. Can't abide witnesses, you understand. And you, my dear, have glimpsed behind the curtain. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the steel's bite. Instead, a sound erupted that jolted them open, laughter, deep, rolling laughter that convulsed his body. Then, bafflingly, he extended a hand, helping me rise from the mud. Gods, he gasped, wiping actual tears from his eyes. Your face, absolutely priceless. I stared, mind reeling, struggling to reconcile the terror with this abrupt shift. What is this? He beamed, the menace evaporating like mist. It's a setup, sweetheart. Content for the channel, see? He tapped a tiny lens affixed near the collar of his hoodie. You just got filmed. A wave of relief crashed over me, so potent it left me weak-kneed, immediately chased by a surge of white-hot fury. Are you serious? I yelled, shoving him, the impact surprisingly solid. You scared me half to death. What is wrong with you? His grin faltered. Hey, easy. It's entertainment. People eat this stuff up online. More words, sharp and furious, were forming on my tongue when a new sound pierced the night's fabric. Sirens, faint but growing rapidly louder. The color drained from the man's face. Damn, he muttered. Someone saw, called it in. We need to bounce. But I planted my feet. No, I stated, the tremor in my voice replaced by cold resolve. I'm not going anywhere. You can explain your entertainment to them. His features hardened, the affable mask dissolving completely. I'm not asking, he snarled, seizing my arm again. The menace was back, raw and undisguised. This was no performance. I fought against his grip, a frantic, desperate struggle. but his strength was absolute. He began dragging me towards the car, fingers biting into my flesh. In that suffocating moment, instinct, primal and sharp, took hold, an echo from a self-defense class years prior. Use what you have. My free hand spasmed in my pocket, closing around the jagged edges of my car keys. With a single convulsive movement, I yanked them free and slashed them across his face. He roared, a sound of pure agony, releasing me to claw at his cheek, where blood now welled. I didn't pause. I ran, down the slick highway towards the approaching crescendo of sirens, towards the pulsating red and blue lights cutting through the rain. His footsteps pounded behind me, a terrifying counter-rhythm to my own panicked flight, but adrenaline and terror lent my legs wings. The police cruiser materialized, its beams blinding. I waved my arms, screaming, a raw sound torn from my lungs. Tires screeched on wet pavement. 2 officers burst out, weapons leveled. "Down, on the ground," one commanded. I collapsed, asphalt cold beneath me, heart threatening to detonate. Behind me, sounds of a brief struggle, the decisive click of handcuffs. Gentle hands helped me up. I turned, trembling, to see my assailant being forced into the cruiser's rear. His eyes met mine across the rain-streaked distance, burning with undiluted hatred. "Are you okay, ma'am?" an officer asked, draping a coarse blanket around my shivering shoulders. I nodded, the movement jerky, my entire being vibrating with delayed shock. "Yes, I think. Thank you." The ensuing hours unfolded in the sterile quiet of the police station. I recounted the night's events. My voice hollow. Silas, they called him, not a prankster, but a predator with a documented history of escalating jokes into actual assaults. The duffel bag, retrieved from my car, contained rope, duct tape, instruments of intent far removed from harmless clicks and views. As I nursed lukewarm coffee, trying to absorb the chasm that had opened beneath my feet, a detective approached. "Miss Reyes," he said, his voice low and considered. "I understand this was deeply traumatic, but you should know, you very likely saved lives tonight. We've been pursuing this individual for months. He was slippery. Because of you, he's contained." His words should have been balm, but numbness prevailed. The stark realization of my proximity to becoming a statistic, a footnote in a grim news cycle, was a weight I couldn't yet fathom. The days and weeks that followed were a landscape of recovery. Driving became an exercise in vigilance, every shadow a potential threat, every passenger scrutinized through a lens of fear. Yet slowly, buttressed by therapy, by the unwavering support of loved ones, healing began. I learned the crucial distinction between prudent caution and unfair judgment, the vital necessity of prioritizing safety over politeness. I never drove for hire again. Instead, the trauma became fuel. I began speaking out, advocating for better safeguards within the ride-share ecosystem. Sharing my story became a way to reclaim power, to urge others to heed that internal alarm, that gut feeling that whispers danger. That rain-soaked night irrevocably altered my contours, yet it also unearthed a resilience I hadn't known resided within me. Caution is now my co-pilot, yes, but fear does not hold the wheel. Because for every Silas lurking in the shadows, countless others walk in the light. And that, even on the darkest, most rain-lashed nights, remains a truth worth clinging to. The tremor wasn't just the ancient engine laboring beneath my feet. It was the premonition tightening in my chest, the instant his hand dipped inside his worn jacket. This steel cocoon hurtling through the Illinois night was about to become an arena. What I hadn't grasped, not yet, was that the true predator wasn't merely the man with the blade, but the dormant violence coiled within my own depths. I'd climbed aboard the Behemoth in Chicago's echoing terminal destination, a speck of a town in Indiana, home to my grandmother Maeve. A summons, really, delivered via a dispassionate voice from the nursing home late the previous night. "She's asking for Alara," the voice had relayed. "Perhaps come soon." The implication hung heavy, unspoken. A duffel hastily packed, a ticket procured, and there I was, adrift on the 11 o'clock departure, surrounded by the disparate souls who haunt the arteries of the night. Perhaps half the seats were claimed when we groaned away from the platform, a familiar constellation. Students lost in headphone symphonies, likely weekend pilgrims returning to familial orbits. A pair of women etched with fatigue, perhaps shedding hospital scrubs or diner aprons. And further back, scattered like solitary stones, men whose faces were maps of hard miles keeping their counsel. I chose a berth mid-coach, stowing my canvas bag beneath my feet like an anchor. As the city's neon calligraphy blurred past the window, the diesel drone and rhythmic sway coaxed me into a shallow, uneasy sleep. How long I drifted, I couldn't say, but I surfaced to it, that electric prickle on the nape, the primal awareness of being prey. Slowly, careful not to betray consciousness, I opened my eyes. The grimy window pane reflected a distorted tableau. A man had claimed the seat directly behind mine. He leaned forward, his attention fixed, unwavering on the back of my head. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A trapped bird. "Paranoia," I hissed inwardly. "Just looking." I shifted, manufacturing a stretch, a yawn, the picture of natural awakening. This granted me my first clear view. Older, 50s perhaps, a salt and pepper beard clinging to a gaunt face. His eyes, though, held a disturbing luminosity in the dim cabin light. Our gazes locked. He offered no retreat, only a slow curve of the lips. That wasn't a smile, but its cold, predatory cousin. "Finally stirred, have we, sleeping beauty?" His voice, a low rasp of gravel. A non-committal murmur escaped me as I turned away, thoughts scattering like startled birds. The bus had sunk into a deeper quiet. Most passengers were submerged in sleep or the blue glow of screens. Outside, only impenetrable darkness, the void between harvested fields and dense woods. I felt him lean closer, his breath stale and hot, ghosting near my ear. "You carrying any treasure, sweetheart? Or maybe a nice phone I could admire?" Ice water sluiced through my veins. Not paranoia, this was the precipice. I don't have much," I stammered, my voice a threadbare whisper. "Just enough for the road." A chuckle, hollow and devoid of mirth. "Don't play games. I watched you board. Nice bag, decent coat. Bet there's plenty worth sharing." Turning to face him, clinging to a desperate hope of reason, of finding some flicker of shared humanity. That's when I saw his hand vanish into his jacket. Time warped, stretched thin, a metallic gleam as he withdrew the knife. Small, yes, but honed to a wicked sharpness. I registered the furtive dart of his eyes, assessing the oblivious carriage, and I saw the precise moment his decision solidified, brutal and plain. The knife would be used, cooperation notwithstanding. In that suspended heartbeat, something tectonic shifted within me. Fear remained, a cold anchor, but it was now intertwined with something else. A chilling, crystalline resolve, an ancient echo from some ancestral cave. Not today, not me. As his arm rose, blade ascending, I moved. Years of self-defense drills, forced upon me by a worried mother, ignited from latency. My hands clamped onto his wrist, twisting savagely as my elbow drove backward into his face. A sickening crunch, his nose, I guessed, and a muffled cry of agony and shock tore from him. The knife clattered onto the worn linoleum floor. I vaulted over the seat back, landing atop him in the cramped space. We wrestled, a tangle of limbs in the narrow confines. His bulk and brute strength against my sheer, adrenaline-fueled desperation. Shouts erupted around us now as the sleepers jolted awake to the sudden violence. His hand found my throat, squeezing, a vice crushing the air out. Black constellations bloomed at the edge of my vision. Gasping, my free hand scrabbled blindly on the floor. Just as consciousness threatened to fray completely, my fingers closed around the knife's handle. Thought dissolved. Instinct ignited. The blade entered, a hideous, yielding punctuation just beneath his ribs. His eyes widened in disbelief, the pressure on my throat releasing. I shoved him away, scrambling back into the aisle, gasping. Chaos detonated. Screams ricocheted off the curved ceiling. The driver's frantic voice crackled about pulling over, but my focus narrowed to the man slumped against the window, dark blood blooming on his shirt, where the knife remained embedded. I stood trembling as the bus lurched to a halt on the highway's gravel shoulder. The driver was a frantic voice on the radio summoning police, an ambulance. A woman identifying herself as a nurse pushed past me, kneeling beside my assailant, fingers seeking a pulse. "He's alive," she announced, the words triggering a dizzying wave of relief. I hadn't killed him. I wasn't a murderer. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting blur. Flashing strobes of red and blue painted the bus interior in frantic strokes. My statement, repeated endlessly, sounded alien, detached from my own lips. They bagged the knife, documented the blossoming bruises on my neck, posed 100 variations of the same questions. By the time they finished, the eastern horizon bled with the first fragile hints of dawn. An officer informed me I was free to go. Clear-cut self-defense. An offer to call someone was met with a shake of my head. All I craved was Maeve's quiet room. Waiting for the replacement coach, I found myself contemplating the person I'd become in those few searing moments. Not the man bleeding in the ambulance, but the Alara capable of driving steel into flesh without a flicker of hesitation. I'd always perceived myself as gentle, conflict-averse. Now the stark truth confronted me. Given the right crucible, pushed to the absolute edge, I possessed a capacity for anything. It was a chilling awareness, yet paradoxically, it resonated with a strange, raw power. The relief bus arrived as the sun breached the horizon, spilling gold onto the dew-kissed fields. Boarding, clutching my bag like a shield, I caught my reflection. different, older somehow, harder. The eyes staring back weren't a victim's. They belonged to a survivor. I found a seat near the front this time, seeking distance, as the new bus pulled away, resuming the journey as if the night's brutality were merely a bad dream. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, alive, safe, and possessed of a strength I never knew existed. But as the miles unspooled towards my destination, an undeniable truth settled. Something fundamental had fractured and reset within me. The world itself felt altered, sharper edged, infinitely more dangerous, yet simultaneously more attainable. The Alara who boarded in Chicago was gone, perished somewhere on that lightless highway stretch. In her place stood someone new, someone acquainted with the metallic taste of violence, the crushing weight of survival. Someone who would never again be caught unawares. The sign welcoming us to Indiana blurred past. A silent vow formed. I would see Maeve, whisper my farewells into the quiet room where life waned. And then I would have to learn the contours of this stranger staring back from the glass. This woman forged in darkness and desperation. The road ahead was shrouded, unknowable, but for the first time I felt equipped to meet whatever it held. I had faced the night's deepest shadow and emerged. Whatever came next, I would be ready. Never did I imagine myself poised in the subterranean gloom of my grandfather's house, a utility blade clutched tight in one hand, a torch beam slicing the dark with the other, the frantic timpani of my own heart echoing in my ears. I certainly hadn't foreseen stumbling upon a concealed recess, crammed with antiquated dolls, their vacant eyes fixed forward, some fragmented, others veiled in dust so profound their features were mere suggestions. Yet there I stood in that precise tableau, the catalyst for all that unraveled thereafter. Months had passed since my grandfather's departure from this world, his archaic house bequeathed to the family. My Aunt Alara managed the labyrinthine legalities. I, seeking some tangible connection perhaps, offered my hands to the task of clearing the place. The others, citing lives too cluttered, declined. So I drove out one weekend, anticipating a task tedious yet fundamentally straightforward. The cellar, repository of mildewed air, was my designated starting point. Best to confront the foulest corner before ascending to the comparatively benign upper floors. The moment I breached the cellar door, a palpable dampness embraced me. The air hung cooler down there, colder than memory served. My torch's beam painted the concrete descent, illuminating the spidery cracks fracturing the edge of each step. I navigated them with deliberate slowness, wary of a treacherous slip. An overhead bulb sputtered to life, weak, flickering, casting unreliable shadows across the concrete confines, the skeletal shelves, the generations of dust-laden boxes. Everything appeared mundane, ordinary at first glance. I began wrestling with the larger detritus, splintered furniture carcasses, fossilized appliances long defunct, a leaning tower of warped vinyl records. Piles formed, monuments to obsolescence. Then my gaze snagged on the shelving unit pressed against the far wall, obscured partially by cartons overflowing with musty-smelling books. 2 leaden boxes required shifting. I grunted, scraping them across the gritty floor. When the space finally cleared, revealing the shelf fully, I went utterly still. A silent congregation of dolls stared back. Porcelain faces gleamed faintly. Others bore the cheap, cheerful aspect of roadside souvenirs from bygone journeys. A ventriloquist's dummy head presided, its painted mouth flaking unnervingly. Nearby sat a figure whose head, fashioned from cloth, bore painted eyes now mostly eroded away. One resembled a plastic hula dancer, circa 1960s tourist trap, her grass skirt reduced to pathetic shreds. Most were diminutive, yet their collective presence radiated an unsettling gravity. Grime and time coated them, but their forms remained distinct, frozen moments captured in ceramic, plastic, and cloth. A tremor ran through me, an involuntary response to those static, watching faces. My hand closed around one, surprisingly dense, crafted from some heavy, old ceramic. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow my movement, a trick of light and shadow I rationally dismissed. I nested it within a cardboard box alongside its brethren, earmarking them mentally for a charity shop donation. Beyond their inherent creepiness, I gave them little thought then. After 2 hours immersed in that stagnant air, my throat raw, I declared a truce for the day. I tidied my efforts, extinguished the weak cellar light, secured the house, and drove the short distance to Aunt Alara's, nestled just a few streets away. The 5-minute journey felt strangely elongated, permeated by an indefinable sense of wrongness. Ilara met me at the door, inquired about my progress. I recounted the discovery of the dolls. Her expression soured slightly. Grandfather, she explained, had harbored a peculiar passion for flea market oddities, accumulating the strangest artifacts, a fascination none of the family ever quite grasped. We ate, conversation drifting to less morbid topics. The dolls momentarily receded from my thoughts. That night, around the spectral hour of 3, I awoke abruptly, bathed in a chilling sweat. My dreamscape had been the cellar, but devoid of my torch. In the oppressive dimness, a sound, movement had drawn my attention. Turning, I perceived a tall silhouette near the wall, distinctly inhuman. Its face mirrored the peeling visage of the ventriloquist head, sharp and defined against a body that blurred like coalescing smoke. The painted mouth worked, hinged open and shut, yet emitted no words, only a faint, dry scraping like wood dragged across concrete. I snapped awake with a violent jerk. Bolt upright, I gasped for air, my shirt clinging damply. My phone screen glowed, 3:07 a.m. My heart hammered against my ribs. Calm down, I told myself. Just a dream. Then a sound, or the ghost of one, pricked my ears. Footsteps in the hallway, impossibly light, stealthy. I held my breath, straining, listening into the profound quiet. 10 seconds stretched into silence. House settling, I reasoned. Ilara getting water. Sleep eventually reclaimed me, but only after a long, uneasy vigil. Over morning coffee, I relayed the nightmare to Ilara. Her expression turned unexpectedly grave. Grandfather, she confided, had spoken of unsettling occurrences in his final months. He'd mentioned one doll specifically, though she couldn't recall which, claiming it shifted position when unobserved. She'd attributed it to dementia, the fog of aging. I attempted a dismissive chuckle, but the sound felt hollow. The dream's figure lingered, its too clear face superimposed on my waking thoughts. Later that day, I returned to the house, resolute on finishing the cellar. specifically on expelling those dolls. I craved their absence. The basement air felt even colder, a stark contrast to the unchanged temperature outside. The overhead bulb performed its irritating flicker dance. I augmented it with a portable work lamp, casting starker, more reliable light. Approaching the shelf, I ripped open a fresh cardboard box, pulling on work gloves against the thick dust. One by one, they came off the shelf. The ventriloquist head, the hula dancer, a clown with crazed, cracked makeup, assorted generic porcelain figures. I arranged them carefully within the box. The shelf, I now realized, was deeper than initially perceived, harboring a second, hidden rank of figures. The final doll I retrieved sported a crudely painted black bow tie and glass eyes that snared the light with disconcerting intensity. As I lifted it, a knot tightened in my stomach. Its limbs dangled limply from cheap fabric shoulders, its hair a brittle synthetic mess. I placed it swiftly in the box, averting my gaze, sealed the carton with packing tape, and scrawled dolls across the top in marker, my hand betraying a slight tremor. I pushed the box aside, intending to haul it upstairs later. Turning to retrieve another empty box, a distinct creak sounded directly behind me. I spun, the marker nearly slipping from my grasp. The box of dolls sat inert. Nothing had moved. Jumpy, I chided myself silently. Pocketing the marker, I resumed sorting through a stack of books. But my nerves remained frayed wires. Every rustle, every shadow seemed pregnant with menace. My head swiveled constantly, half expecting to glimpse the dream figure or to catch a doll subtly out of place. The remainder of the day unfolded in this state of strained vigilance, time dragging its feet. That night found me back at Ilara's. The nightmares intensified. This time I dreamt I was lifting the box of dolls, but it was inexplicably filled with murky water. The dolls floated within, faces bobbing just beneath the surface, eyes wide and staring. One, the ventriloquist head, rose from the liquid, its arm extending towards me. I felt a tangible tug on my own arm within the dream and jolted awake, heart pounding violently. Kicking free of the blankets, I registered a numbness in my arm, likely from sleeping awkwardly, yet in that disoriented moment it felt like a narrow escape. Sweat slicked my neck. My throat felt parched. Rising for water, I scanned the darkened hallway. Ilara's door remained shut. Silence reigned, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. My heartbeat gradually subsided. After a minute, I returned to bed, but genuine sleep proved elusive. The following day, I voiced my intention to dispose of the dolls. Ilara merely shrugged, deeming it my prerogative, yet added a caveat. She wasn't entirely certain grandfather hadn't intended to sell them, or perhaps keep them for some obscure purpose. Conflict warred within me. One impulse screamed to jettison them immediately. Another recoiled at discarding something the old man had spent years acquiring, however unsettling his collection. I compromised, deciding they could remain entombed in the basement box a while longer until the house was fully cleared. Then donation. Once I was certain there was no lingering reason to keep them. Over the next few days, I methodically purged the rest of my grandfather's accumulated possessions, bagging and boxing, making numerous trips to a donation center. Throughout this process, I consciously avoided the doll box. It remained taped shut, its contents unseen. The nightmares, however, became a nightly ritual. Always the figure from the first dream materialized, its face invariably that of the chipped ventriloquist head. It would stand sentinel-like in a shadowed corner of my dreamscape, immobile until I dared to face it directly. Then the jolt awake, the racing heart. Sometimes those faint hallway sounds returned. A furtive shuffle, a single, soft step. I took to sleeping with my phone clutched tight, its flashlight function ready, but investigations yielded nothing tangible. Ilara inquired about my well-being. Just stress, I deflected. She didn't press. One evening, lingering over dinner, I probed again about grandfather's final months. Ilara elaborated. He'd grown convinced one specific doll was actively following him, changing locations when his back was turned, even peeking around doorways. Medication side effects, hallucinations. That was the logical conclusion she maintained, yet admitted the stories had left her feeling uneasy. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. My attempt at laughter emerged strained and unconvincing. That night, sleep came only through sheer exhaustion, preceded by hours of tense wakefulness. On my final day clearing the house, I descended into the basement imbued with a forced confidence, determined to resolve the doll situation. Both the overhead bulb and my work lamp blazed, offering some comfort. The box sat undisturbed in its corner. I hefted it, gauging the weight. It seemed heavier than I recalled. Imagination, surely. Step by painstaking step, I began the ascent, my lower back protesting. My objective, load it into my car's trunk, drop it at the thrift store en route out of town. Halfway up the concrete stairs, I heard it, a distinct scratching sound. I froze, balancing the box against my knee, a loose step shifting. I adjusted my weight. The scratch repeated, faint but undeniable. A cold prickle traversed my scalp. My chest constricted. Act normal, I commanded myself, though my breath came quick and shallow. I forced another upward step, legs trembling subtly. Cardboard rubbing, I rationalized. Another scratch. Jaw clenched, I pushed onward, reaching the top floor slick with nervous sweat. I deposited the box near the front door, performed a final lockup, and walked to my car. My hands trembled as I popped the trunk. Carefully, I settled the box inside. My eyes flickered to the taped lid, half expecting it to rupture. It remained sealed. Closing the trunk felt decisive, yet yielded no relief. My face flushed hot, my stomach churned. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the engine, gripping the wheel tightly, heart still galloping. A final glance at the house in the rearview mirror, then I pulled away. But the thrift store passed by, unnoticed initially, then deliberately ignored. Some internal governor prevented me from turning in. A strange amalgam of guilt and nascent fear stayed my hand. The thought of unleashing these things upon some unsuspecting shopper sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. I found myself driving back to Ilara's, parking in her driveway, engine idling for long minutes as I wrestled with my own escalating dread. Finally, I cut the engine and went inside, offering no explanation for the box still residing in my trunk. I simply needed another night, I told her. She acquiesced without question. Sleep was impossible for hours, my thoughts orbiting the cardboard sarcophagus in my car. The nightmares, the scratching, they replayed relentlessly. I had to choose, dispose of them definitively, or sequester them until I understood something. Morning, I promised myself. I'll deal with it in the morning. That night delivered the apex of terror. The basement dreamscape again, the flickering bulb. The figure stood in its corner, but this time it moved towards me, jerkily, unnaturally, like a marionette manipulated by unseen hands. Its head lolled, the painted mouth gaped, my chest seized, paralysis rooted me. It extended its arms, each motion stiff, grotesque. I woke, gasping, utterly drenched, pillow-soaked, mouth arid. Lying rigid, staring at the ceiling, I listened to the frantic thudding in my chest. Morning came. I went to the trunk, lifted the lid, stared down at the box. Tape intact. No sign of disturbance, just a fine layer of road dust. I slammed the trunk shut, a sharp, violent sound in the quiet morning air, and went back inside. When Alara asked if I needed help dropping anything off, I lied, claiming everything was already donated. Then, feigning urgency, I announced my departure for home. Driving away from her quiet street, hitting the highway, the tension coiled tighter in my shoulders. Every glance in the rearview mirror conjured the box, its unseen occupants. I forced my focus onto the road, yet peripheral thoughts painted images of dolls jostling within, heads bumping rhythmically with each curve. A chill permeated the car despite the inactive heater. Now I am home. The box sits in my garage. I have not reopened it. Part of me screams to haul it to the curb. Let the sanitation truck swallow it whole. Another, quieter part is restrained by that inexplicable guilt. Discarding grandfather's bizarre legacy feels like a betrayal. And beneath it all, the fear whispers, what if disposal invites consequences? It sounds absurd, irrational, yet the feeling persists, tenacious. Some nights I fancy I hear faint scuttling noises from the garage, tiny footfalls, soft taps against concrete. Investigations reveal nothing, but the sensation remains. The prickle on my neck, the vivid image of that chipped, painted face from my dreams. I remain inert, trapped between disposal and preservation. For now, they stay sealed within their cardboard prison. Courage fails me for either decisive action. Sometimes I stand in the quiet of my garage, simply staring at the box, listening, waiting for a scratch, a tap, silence thus far. But I know tonight, sleep will bring the dream again. I will see that face observing me from the shadows. I will wake gasping, heart hammering, certain I heard those soft footsteps just outside my bedroom door. And I will lie there, sweating in the dark, wondering what in God's name I am supposed to do. A whisper of movement gone before my eye could truly snag it, flickered at the edge of sight. The second, less shy, sent a tremor through my chest. When the third coalesced from the deepening gloom, a cold certainty settled in my gut. This expedition through unfamiliar urban arteries was no mere shortcut. It was a snare, elegantly laid, and I, Silas, had blundered straight into its jaws. Adventure had always been my siren call. As a lensman chasing ephemeral light and fleeting moments, I courted strange geographies and stranger hours. Tonight promised the same familiar thrill, a skyline portrait at the precise moment of twilight surrender. I'd sought guidance, and the locals, with furrowed brows, muttered warnings about this particular quarter. Rough, they'd said. I waved away their caution like smoke. I'd navigated plenty of fractured cityscapes, emerging unscathed, my prize secured. Crimson bled across the horizon as I plunged deeper into the labyrinthine embrace of narrowing streets. The dying sun stretched shadows into grotesque caricatures animating inert brick and refuse. My camera satchel, a familiar weight against my hip, felt suddenly heavier, clutched tighter now not from habit, but nascent unease. It began as I navigated a passage barely wider than my shoulders. That primal prickle, the skin's awareness of unseen scrutiny. A glance back revealed only empty, echoing stone. I pushed the sensation down, urged my legs onward. Then the first phantom flicker, so swift, so silent, a mere retinal glitch I almost dismissed. Almost. My stride quickened, my gaze now a restless searchlight, sweeping the oppressive architecture. Buildings leaned inward, their vacant window eyes absorbing the last light. Graffiti writhed across decaying walls, the alley constricting, evolving into a suffocating passage with every step. The second shadow possessed volition. A definite silhouette flowed, liquid smooth from one shadowed doorway to another, further down my path. The tremor in my chest became a frantic drumbeat. Fear, cold and sharp, finally pierced my practiced nonchalance. This was no phantasm born of tired eyes or anxious imagination. An intelligence watched, tracked, guided. I pivoted, intending retreat, only to find a third darkness peeling away from an alcove behind me, sealing the passage. The realization struck with visceral force. I was being channeled, steered like livestock. My quick walk bled into a jog, then shattered into a desperate sprint. Footfalls now echoed mine, multiple cadences bouncing off the grimy brickwork, closing in. They materialized from intersecting alleys, from unseen recesses, their proximity tightening like a noose. I veered wildly, seeking escape routes, but each turn presented the same bleak vista, constricted, garbage-strewn, rife with potential ambush points. My lungs burned, air tearing at my throat, the camera bag thudding against my ribs like a frantic second heart. Rounding a corner, hope flared and died. A chain-link fence, rusted but impassable, barred the way. Beyond its diamond mesh, tantalizingly close, flowed the river of a main thoroughfare, headlights slicing the dusk, ordinary life proceeding, utterly oblivious. Safety, a world away. I lunged for the fence, metal teeth biting into my palms as I scrambled upward. Halfway, a grip like iron clamped onto my ankle, arresting my ascent. A blind, desperate kick connected. A choked grunt followed, the pressure momentarily releasing. I surged over the top, tumbling onto the cracked pavement beyond. But the pursuit hadn't ended. The scrape and rattle of metal behind me signaled they were climbing, relentless. I bolted towards the distant streetlights, towards the indifferent flow of traffic. My only prayer to reach that sanctuary before they reclaimed me. I erupted onto the relative brightness of the sidewalk, a ragged, gasping mess, eyes wide with hunted terror. Passers-by cast startled and curious glances before hurrying on. I spun, braced for the emergence of my hunters from the alley's maw. Nothing. The narrow passage remained dark, silent, empty. They had evaporated, dissolved back into the brick and shadow. For a disoriented moment, heart slamming against my ribs, I questioned my sanity. Had the entire chase been a hallucination? But the raw sting of scraped palms and the throb where fingers had bruised my ankle were undeniable anchors to reality. Providence arrived in the form of a cruising patrol car. I flagged it down, relief washing over me in a dizzying wave. The officers absorbed my breathless narrative with poorly concealed skepticism, yet agreed to sweep the vicinity. Their search yielded nothing. No furtive figures, no lingering menace in the warren of alleys. "Probably kids having a laugh," one offered, his tone dismissive. "Gets dicey round here after sundown. Shouldn't be wandering solo." I offered a weary nod, lacking the strength to argue. Their offer of a ride back to my hotel was a lifeline I grasped gratefully. As the car pulled away, the sensation of being watched lingered, a phantom pressure against my spine, emanating from the shadowed recesses we left behind. Sleep, back in the sterile anonymity of my room, was a shallow, elusive thing. Every creak from the corridor, every siren wailing in the distance, jolted me upright. The chase replayed itself endlessly behind my closed eyelids, each decision scrutinized, each turn second-guessed. The warnings ignored, the shortcut taken, the lure of the perfect shot overriding caution. Morning arrived, gray and unforgiving. Against all rational instinct, I returned. Daylight stripped the menace from the alleys, revealing only neglect and decay. With my camera now an instrument of investigation rather than art, I retraced my frantic path. Scuff marks marred the fence top. Small validation, otherwise nothing. Then, as I turned to leave, my gaze snagged on something partially obscured by a dented dumpster. Spray-painted onto the brick, a stark symbol, an angular triangle cradling a stylized, watchful eye. It resonated with no known iconography, yet it sent an icy rivulet down my back. I captured its image, a quick, furtive click of the shutter, then retreated, feeling vulnerable even under the broad, indifferent sky. Hours vanished back at the hotel, lost in the digital labyrinth of online searches. The symbol became a key, unlocking forums filled with whispered conspiracies and fragmented urban folklore. Tales surfaced of clandestine fraternities ruling cities from below, of ritualistic hunts conducted through concrete jungles, absurd most of it. Yet certain threads snagged uncomfortably on the fabric of my experience. The calculated coordination, the sudden vanishing act near witnesses, the cryptic sigil left as a territorial marker. The parallels were too sharp to dismiss entirely. The skyline remained uncaptured. My assignment was completed with images devoid of risk, shot in the bland safety of populated, well-lit spaces. Departure from the city was a relief, though I scanned the crowds at the airport, half expecting a familiar shadow. Years have etched caution onto my approach. Main arteries are my roots now. Solitary nocturnal explorations in strange cities are relics of a bolder, perhaps more foolish, past. Call it paranoia. I prefer to think of it as learned prudence. Yet, sometimes immersed in the quiet solitude of editing, a detail in the periphery of a photograph, an anomalous shadow, an indistinct figure blurred by distance, will trigger the recall. The echo of pounding feet on pavement, the claustrophobic embrace of those alleys, the certainty of being prey. Who were they? What purpose propelled their silent hunt? Was I a random target, an incidental intrusion, or something more deliberate? These questions remain unanswered, specters haunting the edges of memory, but this I understand. Maps omit vast territories within our own cities. Unseen populations move through the interstices of the known world, cloaked in shadow, and straying too close, too carelessly, invites the risk of crossing an invisible threshold. So heed that instinct, that prickle of awareness in unfamiliar territory. Do not rationalize it. Do not dismiss it. Flee towards the light, towards the crowd, towards sanctuary, because a shortcut unwisely taken can lead not to a destination, but to a darker geography entirely. And should you ever encounter that symbol, the eye within the triangle, retrace your steps. Some enigmas are best left undisturbed, some hidden worlds best left unseen. For once the shadows have revealed a glimpse of their occupants, the full comfort of the light is forever diminished. The memory remains sharp, etched like a gouge in timber. The night the susurrations began. Solitude was my companion in the workshop then, the cavernous space lit only by the amber halo of a single floor lamp beside my workbench. My fingers gritty with the fine powder from sanding the mahogany curves of a Victorian chest traced its contours. A week prior, I'd claimed it from an estate liquidation, anticipating little more than a satisfying puzzle of joinery and finish. Yet, from the first contact, a dissonant chord had struck within me, a tremor of unease I'd dismissed as the day's accumulated weariness. 15 years I've spent, Elias Thorne, coaxing life back into forgotten wood. Strange legacies cling to old things, but this felt different. A breath, cool and phantom, brushed my ear. Then the sound, barely there, a wisp of voice, less than a word perhaps, abruptly silenced. I froze, the sander falling quiet. My gaze swept the workshop, a vast concrete expanse beneath high, shadowed beams, windows staring blankly onto the deserted street, work tables islands of half-born projects. Order reigned elsewhere, tools marshaled in labeled plastic bins. Only the low drone of a corner fan disturbed the stillness. I strained my ears. Nothing. Fatigue, surely. A sigh escaped me as I scrubbed my hands on a rag, resolving to surrender to the night. But locking the heavy door, stepping into the cool air, I carried an unseen weight. A knot tightened in my neck. My breath hitched, shallow. The drive home was a blur. The television's flickering screen ignored as my mind circled back obsessively to that truncated whisper. Not the wind sighing through eaves, nor the groan of aging architecture. It had the cadence of speech, stifled mid-utterance. I banished the thought, sought refuge in sleep. Dawn broke gray and tentative as I returned, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of work. Overhead fluorescents hummed to life, chasing shadows. Masks secured, I addressed the chest's intricate edges, the fine grit paper whispering against the wood. Then it returned. Not a fleeting breath this time, but a sustained murmur, undeniably emanating from the chest's hollow interior. A visceral tension seized me, my hands locked, sandpaper mid-stroke. My own pulse thundered, a frantic drum against my ribs. Compelled, I leaned in, pressing my ear to the narrow gap where a drawer should slide, holding my breath, listening. The whisper coiled again, forming a distinct phrase. My surname. Thorne. A jolt electric shot through me. I recoiled, stumbling back, heart hammering. Imagination. Stress manifesting as auditory hallucination. A desperate plea for a mundane explanation. Warred against the chilling clarity of the sound. No, this felt chillingly real. Work, I decided. Push through, ignore it. I retrieved my tools, focusing on the mundane task of securing loose screws on the back panel. That's when the voice sharpened, gained chilling intimacy. It spoke of Silas, my father. It whispered of the crescent scar tissue puckering the skin on his left hand, recalled the heavy gold signet ring he perpetually twisted, details buried deep, secrets I guarded. The screwdriver slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the concrete. I scrambled backward until the edge of my workbench halted my retreat. My breath came in ragged gasps, eyes fixed on the inert, yet terribly alive mahogany chest. Trembling, I dialed Silas, his home 2 towns distant. A Victorian chest, Silas, mahogany. Did you ever? His denial was swift, emphatic, too emphatic. When I relayed the whispered details, the scar, the ring, his voice hardened, defensiveness coating the words. Idle gossip, Elias, don't chase phantoms. He deflected, shifted topic, leaving me clutching a silent phone, a knot of disquiet tightening in my gut. Perhaps fresh air would dispel the illusion. Wrestling the heavy piece outside, I maneuvered it into the back alley, settling it upon a sturdy crate beneath the indifferent sky. I resumed sanding, the rasp of paper against wood a desperate anchor to normalcy. Yet, even here, exposed to the breeze and the city's distant hum, the whispers clung, intensifying. No longer a single voice, but a chorus, a layered murmuring just below comprehension, like secrets shared in a crowded room. My hands began an uncontrollable tremor, a frantic scan of the alley, cracked pavement, overflowing bins, graffiti-scarred walls, revealed nothing. Empty, defeated, I hauled the chest back into the workshop's stale air, rolling the heavy garage door shut with a clang that echoed my own frayed nerves. There had to be a physical explanation, a trick of acoustics, a hidden mechanism. Armed with a high-intensity flashlight, I probed the chest's depths. Dust motes danced in the beam, revealing only aged timber, the faint, musty perfume of decades. No obvious cracks, no insect colonies, nothing that could channel wind or sound. I threaded a small fiber-optic camera into every recess. Emptiness stared back. By midday, concentration was a lost cause. The whispers persisted, intermittent yet insistent, weaving a tight knot of anxiety in my stomach. They knew my name, Elias. They dredged up memories long submerged, fragments of childhood embarrassment, private failures I hadn't consciously recalled in years. Humiliation washed over me, cold and sharp. Enough. Leaving the chest brooding in the center of the room, I grabbed my truck keys and drove, retracing my route to the estate sale's origin. The house loomed, a grand Victorian dame succumbing to neglect, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, the yard choked with weeds around a fractured fence. My knock echoed unanswered. As I turned away, a curtain twitched next door. A woman, Mrs. Gable, emerged, eyeing me with cautious curiosity. The owners, she explained, were gone, leaving the property to far-flung relatives who'd swiftly liquidated its contents. The chest? I prompted. She frowned, recalling it in the shadowed living room. Always locked, she added. Never saw a key. A shrug, a murmured pleasantry, and she retreated, leaving me on the broken pavement with less than I'd arrived with. Frustration simmered as I returned to the workshop. The moment I crossed the threshold, the whispers surged, stronger now, imbued with a chilling purpose. Underneath, they seemed to hiss. The bottom drawer, taped. Adrenaline spiked, cold and sharp. I wrenched the lowest drawer free, flipped it clumsily. There, adhered to the rough underside, was a small, discolored envelope. My name, Elias Thorne, was inscribed upon it in faded, spidery ink. My hands shook as I eased it loose. the paper brittle beneath my touch. Inside, a folded sheet of parchment crackled as I unfolded it. The script was archaic, elegant. It spoke of Arthur, my grandfather. It detailed events from the 1970s, painting a picture of illicit dealings, of forged documents, a life I never knew existed. My grandfather, the quiet man, the tinkerer in his own workshop, involved in fraud. Below the damning narrative, a stark admonition: trust no one. I sank onto a nearby stool, a clammy sweat beading on my forehead. How could my name be on this relic hidden within a piece of furniture I'd acquired by chance decades later? The whispers eddied around me, louder now, almost triumphant, urging me onward. Ask Silas more. Look in Arthur's shed. The pressure mounted, an invisible weight. With sudden resolve, I dragged the chest to a far corner, shrouded it beneath a heavy canvas tarp, and fled the workshop, locking the door firmly behind me. Sleep offered no escape that night. Tossing in sweat-dampened sheets, mouth dry as dust, my mind replayed the image of the parchment, the secrets it held. Before the sky even hinted at dawn, around 5 a.m., I was back in my truck, driving the familiar route to Silas's quiet street. He answered my insistent knocking, bewildered, bundled in his robe against the pre-dawn chill. "Arthur's shed," I stated, bypassing pleasantries. "I need to see inside." Hesitation flickered in his eyes, then resignation. He led me around back, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The shed door groaned open, releasing a fug of mold and old sawdust. It was cramped, cluttered with ghosts of tools on hooks, dominated by a hulking, rust-streaked metal cabinet. "Just junk, Elias," Silas insisted, his voice strained. "Nothing worthwhile." Ignoring him, I forced the warped cabinet door. Inside lay yellowed ledgers, brittle receipts, bundled notes. Most were illegible, victims of time and damp, but one stack, incongruously preserved in plastic wrap, caught my eye. As I reached for it, Silas's gaze darted nervously. "Careful," he murmured. I peeled back the plastic. Official-looking documents emerged, some bearing seals, others half-completed forms, names I didn't recognize, references to properties scattered across states, notations of substantial sums, and Arthur's signature repeated, undeniable. Silas let out a long, shuddering sigh. The dam broke. Arthur, my quiet grandfather, had been entangled in a significant fraud scheme. It ended badly, Silas confessed, hushed tones barely audible. Debts were paid, silence bought. He'd sworn an oath never to speak of it. A cold fist clenched in my stomach. The whispers. They hadn't lied. This wasn't just furniture, it was a repository somehow of my family's buried history. I told him about the letter. Fear flared in his eyes, genuine and stark. His hands trembled. "I don't know, Elias, I swear. I don't know how it got there. Maybe Arthur hid it. Hoped you'd find it someday." The question hung, absurd and chilling. How could Arthur possibly foresee this convergence of object and descendant across decades? Silas had no answer. I drove back to my workshop, clutching the damning documents, the plastic crinkling under my grip. The moment I stepped inside, the whispers greeted me. Urgent now, insistent. "A compartment," they breathed. "Lower drawer. Hidden." Again, I was drawn to the chest, pulling out each drawer, running my fingers along every joint, every surface. In the back of the bottom drawer cavity, my fingertips snagged on a slightly loose board. Prying it carefully revealed a small hollow, nestled within, glinting dully. lay a small brass key. A tiny number was stamped onto its head. Recognition sparked. I'd glimpsed a similar sequence among Silas's papers once, a safe deposit box code. My heart hammered against my ribs. Pocketing the key, I felt the whispers recede slightly, a sated quality to their fading murmur, though their presence lingered, a psychic hum in the air. In the days that followed, the chest's utterances shifted, becoming predictive. One morning, a disembodied murmur hinted at an important call, someone long absent from my life. Absurd, I thought. Yet that afternoon, my phone rang. Uncle Finian, relocated a decade ago, calling out of the blue about an old property Arthur had owned. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. The whispers had known. Later, they spoke of a sealed safe in Silas's basement, filled with more records. When I confronted him, his face went pale, as if I'd read his mind. He admitted its existence, just old photos, some jewelry, he claimed, but his evasiveness screamed otherwise. Each day became a pilgrimage back to the workshop, back to the unsettling communion with the chest. It parceled out information, fragments of foresight. I took to wearing thick industrial earplugs, a futile gesture. The buzzing persisted. A vibration felt more than heard, lodging itself behind my eyes. No pain, just a constant low-grade anxiety that kept my shoulders perpetually tensed, my palms slick with sweat whenever I drew near. The compulsion was undeniable. Check it, open the drawers, listen. The predictions continued, unnervingly accurate, small things mostly, unexpected visitors, appliances failing without warning, sudden shifts in weather. But the larger revelations always circled back to the family's shadowed dealings. I found myself immersed in a past not my own, sifting through bank statements, property deeds, dusty crates in Silas's attic, returning again and again to Arthur's decaying shed. Each discovery brought a momentary quieting from the chest, a fleeting sense of appeasement, as if I were fulfilling some arcane obligation. My sanity felt increasingly fragile, stretched thin. I tried to divest myself of the chest, listed it online, a handsome Victorian piece meticulously described. Silence. Not a single inquiry, unheard of in my trade. I resolved to haul it to a storage unit, banish it from my daily life. But the moment I began maneuvering it toward the loading dock, the whispers escalated into a cacophony, sharp and hostile. A piercing headache bloomed behind my eyes, intensifying with every inch I moved the chest, receding only when I reluctantly returned it to its corner. It wouldn't leave. It seemed tethered to this space, to me. Defeated, I draped it once more in its shroud. One gray afternoon, resolve hardening within me, I confronted it directly. Yanking off the canvas cover, I stood before the polished mahogany. "I know what you're doing," I said aloud, my voice echoing slightly in the large space. "I know about Arthur, about the secrets." A faint vibration resonated through the concrete floor beneath my boots, a subtle tremor. The whispers answered, swirling, coalescing into a chilling narrative. This was set in motion decades ago. I was merely the final player stepping onto a stage long prepared. Vertigo threatened, but I held my ground, refusing to look away. After that confrontation, the chest's predictions narrowed their focus, turning inward, toward me. They whispered of my next moves, foretold who would contact me regarding the secrets, hinted at what awaited me in the bank vault. I fought against it, tried to reclaim my own agency, but the knowledge lodged itself in my mind. Sleep became a shallow, restless state. My eyes felt raw, my appetite vanished. Pacing the workshop became my default state, the shrouded chest a constant silent accusation in the periphery. I had unearthed a dark vein in my family's history, and there was no reburying it. Silas predictably stopped answering my calls, undoubtedly terrified of what else I might excavate. Finally surrendering to the inevitable, I followed the last tangible lead. The brass key felt heavy in my pocket as I walked into the downtown bank branch, matching the code. Explaining my connection to Arthur Thorne, presenting identification, navigating the polite skepticism of the clerk. It all felt predetermined. She eventually led me to a hushed, private viewing room. The safe deposit box yielded its treasures, brittle black and white photographs of Arthur flanked by unknown, stern-faced men, receipts documenting vast sums changing hands, passports bearing Arthur's likeness but different names, a few pieces of dated, expensive jewelry, no overt signs of violence, but irrefutable proof of a life lived in the shadows. Gathering the contents, I felt a profound weariness settle over me. Back in the familiar quiet of my workshop, I spread the photos and papers across my workbench under the stark fluorescent lights. The whispers rose expectantly, guiding my gaze to one specific photograph, Arthur, younger, smiling uncertainly. "Behind it," they urged. I carefully slid the photo from its cheap frame. Scrawled across the cardboard backing in Arthur's unmistakable hand was a final message. Regret poured from the faded ink for his choices, for the burden of discovery he'd left me. He hoped for forgiveness, acknowledging the chest itself had been integral to his life's greatest gamble. An apology for the silence, for the secrets revealed in this spectral manner. I stared at the note, emotion churning within me, anger, pity, confusion. My chest felt tight, constricted. The whispering softened, becoming indistinct, like the sighing of a distant wind through pines. Calmer. With the note laid carefully aside, I turned back to the chest. A peculiar sense of purpose filled me. I would finish the restoration. Methodically, patiently, I sanded the surfaces to a silken smoothness, applied fresh stain that deepened the mahogany's flame, meticulously tightened and polished the brass handles. As I worked, the whispers seemed to guide my hands, pointing out minute imperfections, indicating where the old wood needed reinforcement. By the time I applied the final gleaming coat of varnish, the voices had dwindled to near silence, an echo fading on the edge of hearing. Stepping back, I surveyed my work. The chest stood solid, beautifully restored, its dark wood glowing, complete. A strange calm settled over me, tinged with lingering unease. It had yielded its secrets. Arthur's hidden life was now mine to carry. I draped the canvas shroud over it one last time, locked the workshop, and drove home. For the first time in weeks, the whispers did not follow. The chest remains in the corner of my workshop, quiescent beneath its covering. Weeks have passed without a murmur. Silas and I exist in a state of strained silence. The necessary conversation looms, heavy and unspoken. Closure feels too simple a word for the knot of tension that remains. Yet the oppressive presence has lifted. Sometimes I catch myself glancing towards the corner, wondering if its silence is permanent or merely a pause. Is it truly finished, or just waiting? For now, I live with the quiet and with the weight of knowing it's more than enough. Its genesis was unremarkable, a mere thread of sound woven beneath the drone of my supervisor's voice during some tedious conference call concerning projections and fiscal quarters. Almost imperceptible, a sibilant murmur, gone the instant I tilted my head, pressing the receiver closer. Nothing. 3 weeks have dissolved since that initial anomaly. Now bathed in the pre-dawn gloom of my living room, 3 a.m., pressing heavy, my gaze fixes upon the mobile device resting on the coffee table. It lies there inert, yet potent as a primed explosive. 2 minutes past its ringing commenced. The insistent summons of the spectral caller, 555, error 194, the digit sequence that has become my personal haunting. A tremor originates deep within, traveling the length of my arm as I extend a hand. That first whisper, a siren song I should never have acknowledged, let alone pursued. But ignorance was a fortress then, unbreached. The descent began with deceptive normalcy. Following the call with management, the phantom utterance reappeared, this time nestled within a conversation with my mother. Mere sonic fragments initially, indecipherable static clinging to the edges of her words, yet undeniably present. I meticulously cleaned the phone's speaker grills, scoured the vicinity for sources of interference, escalated the issue to my service provider. Their technician, after remote diagnostics, declared the line immaculate. Likely network traffic, perhaps a fleeting weak signal, he offered placidly. Inform us should the issue persist. Persist it did, and it intensified. Within a matter of days, the fragmented whispers coalesced, sharpening into distinct, albeit hushed, articulations. It was then, hearing actual words, that the first tendrils of a profound, icy fear took root. These were not random intrusions, they were observations. Specific, accurate observations about me. Cerulean shirt today, it breathed during a mundane call to confirm a dental appointment. I froze mid-sentence, my own eyes dropping to the very blue button-down I wore. Coffee spilled across the desk this morning, it murmured hours later, while I navigated a complex discussion with a client. My focus shattered, darting to the faint brown Rorschach blot marring the wood grain, a stain I'd mentally flagged for later cleaning. Neglected to secure the car door again, insinuated another transmission. Indeed, a nagging uncertainty had compelled me back to the company parking lot barely an hour prior just to check the lock. A clammy dampness began to accompany every interaction involving the phone. My pulse would accelerate into a frantic rhythm, anticipating that soft, insidious voice threading itself between the syllables of ordinary dialogue. I started chronicling each occurrence, logging dates, times, content, desperately seeking some discernible pattern in the intrusions. The early comments seemed trivial, attire, minor actions, small lapses in habit. But the intimacy deepened, the focus narrowing onto more personal terrain. Still ache for her, don't you? It whispered, quiet as falling dust, during a call with my brother. Only moments before the phone had rung, I'd been lost in an old photograph of Eliza, my former love. Should have spent more time with your father before the end. That particular barb landed during a work-related call. piercing through the professional veneer. That very morning, my thoughts had drifted guiltily to his final days in the hospice. My obsession grew. I began recording every call, replaying them through high-fidelity headphones, straining to isolate the parasitic voice. Futile. The recordings were clean, devoid of any anomaly. The whispers existed solely within the confines of my own perception. The fracture point arrived the previous week. Engaged in conversation with my friend Leo, the voice slid into the call, smooth as venom. The firearm remains in the nightstand drawer, correct? Precisely where you secreted it a decade ago. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering against the floorboards as if charged with electricity. That gun, untouched since Eliza's departure, unacknowledged even in my thoughts for years, a secret kept inviolate. No one had ever been told. A low chuckle followed, dry and abrasive, like autumn leaves skittering across asphalt. That precipitated the investigation into the number itself. 555-0194. Every call now originated from this sequence, yet dialing it yielded only a sterile automated response declaring the number non-operational. Inquiries with every major telecommunications carrier proved fruitless. None held any registration record. Driven by desperation, I engaged a private investigator, offering a premium for expedited results. Extraordinarily peculiar, he reported back 2 days later, his voice tinged with professional bafflement. That prefix 555 followed by 01, it's unassigned, shouldn't technically exist within this region's numbering plan. It's as if the calls originate from nowhere. I ceased answering my phone, powered it down entirely. It resurrected itself. The calls resumed. The whispers elongated, growing richer in detail, shifting to real-time commentary. Your hands exhibit tremors again, it would observe. Cardiac rhythm currently approximates 110 beats per minute. You have now foregone sleep for 37 consecutive hours. In a fit of frantic purging, I dismantled the phone, purchased a replacement, acquired a new number. The calls migrated, relentless. My sense of self began to fray, unraveling thread by thread. Security cameras sprouted throughout my home, blank eyes monitoring every room. Yet their recordings revealed only solitude, my solitary figure pacing empty spaces, haunted by an invisible, omniscient presence. Last night marked a terrifying escalation. Sleep remained elusive when the phone's insistent ringing pierced the silence. The voice, however, shed its clandestine whisper. It spoke with conversational clarity. "Do you recall the 15th of July, 2013? It inquired, the tone almost casual. "The evening you trailed Eliza after witnessing her with him? Do you recall the precipice upon which you stood?" Nausea churned violently within me. That night was a buried shard of memory, never exhumed, never confessed. The terrifying proximity I'd skirted to an irrevocable act. "You possessed the firearm then too," the voice continued, unhurried. "Positioned in your vehicle outside his residence for 3 hours. You chambered around, ejected it, chambered it once more. Ultimately, you departed. A judicious decision, superior certainly to the course you contemplate at this present moment." I terminated the call, heart hammering against my ribs. Instantly it rang again, and again, and again. which returns us to this moment enshrined in the oppressive quiet of 3 a.m. The phone shrills, displaying 555-0194. My hand, betraying me with its trembling, lifts the device. The need to comprehend, to grasp the nature of this entity and its impossible knowledge overrides all fear. Hello? My voice emerges fractured, barely audible. The whisper returns instantly sharper, clearer than ever. You truly wish to ascertain my identity? Yes, the syllable scrapes my throat like pulverized glass. Consult your email. My laptop rests nearby. With unsteady fingers, I navigate to my inbox. A new message resides there. Sender address, an impossible string, null. Subject line, void. I click. Contained within is a single video file. The thumbnail depicts this very room, my living room, now. I initiate playback. The perspective originates from the corner diagonally behind me. On screen, I observe my own form hunched on the sofa, phone clamped to my ear. A timestamp in the lower corner confirms the feed is live. Yet, no camera occupies that corner. I orchestrated the security installation myself. Every lens position is known to me. My head whips around, pulse frantic. The corner looms, vacant, steeped in shadow. Continue observing, the voice murmurs through the phone line. On the laptop display, my digital self mirrors my action, turning towards the corner, and then something detaches itself from the deepest shadows behind my on-screen counterpart. A figure tall and indistinct, impossibly present. Simultaneously, I register a cool exhalation against the nape of my neck. Remember observing Eliza through her windows? The whisper is no longer confined to the phone. It manifests directly beside my ear. Recall the surge of power that afforded you? Now you experience the inverse. A paralysis seizes my limbs. Flight is impossible. On the screen, I witness the shadowed figure extend an arm towards my digital representation, its hand mere inches from my shoulder. We have observed you for such a prolonged duration, it continues, the voice intimate, chilling. Every clandestine moment, each dark contemplation, all the secrets you believe are yours alone. I feel the brush of fingertips against my shoulder, cold, impossibly cold. But we are privy to everything, are we not? We always were. And the time has arrived for your integration. After all, your aptitude for watching is notable. You shall assimilate seamlessly. The hand clamps down upon my shoulder, an inescapable grip. On the laptop screen, the figure's face pivots into view. For the first time, I discern its features. It wears my face. My exact features replicated perfectly save for the eyes. Abyssal voids, black holes swallowing all light, promising infinite depth. A scream builds within my chest, yet remains trapped, soundless. The thing bearing my countenance leans closer, its breath glacial against my ear. Time necessitates a choice, it whispers, a parallel to that evening with Eliza. This instance, however, offers no avenue of retreat. The room plunges into a deeper cold, shadows consolidating. The grip on my shoulder intensifies, an inexorable pull backward, drawing me towards those vacant, mimicking eyes. My phone lies abandoned on the coffee table. It begins to ring one final time. the screen glows with the now familiar sequence 5555194, but this call will go unanswered. The darkness claims me utterly. When authorities discovered my remains 3 days hence, the phone was still emitting its unanswered summons. The official report cited probable cardiac arrest, yet offered no explanation for the mask of profound terror etched onto my features. Nor could they account for the thousands of logged calls from a non-existent number or the perplexing video file retrieved from my laptop, footage displaying an empty living room, time-stamped precisely to the estimated moment of my demise. The investigation remains open, filed under inexplicable phenomena. Yet sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, telephones ring unexpectedly in dwellings scattered across the metropolis, and should you attune your hearing with sufficient care, you might discern a whisper coiled within the connection. It might even bear a resemblance to my own voice. Heed this. Should such whispers find their way to your ear, resist the urge to investigate. Do not seek understanding, and under absolutely no circumstances should you answer when that particular number illuminates your screen, because the observation is perpetual, the listening constant, and the solitude here within the dark is profound. We yearn for companionship. Ring, ring. Is that your device summoning you now? The magnetic pull was the price, an absurdity too compelling to dismiss. This house, steeped in the sediment of more than a century according to the listing, called to me. Minor dilapidations, the seller had murmured, the usual aches of old age, nothing alarming. The street drowsed under a canopy of mature trees, and the prospect of inhabiting a fragment of history resonated. My aspirations were simple: forge a home. Satisfaction bloomed warm in my chest the moment the ink dried on the deed. Mine now. This structure boasting cavernous windows that drank the light, ceilings aspiring to cathedral heights, and tucked away above, an attic of formidable dimension. A veritable coup, I congratulated myself. Then commenced the susurrus. It found me that inaugural night, adrift in the liminal space preceding sleep. A faint disturbance from overhead, delicate as moth wings against glass. It shaped itself almost into my name, yet so ethereal I dismissed it as dream fragment. I slid from bed, navigating the passage toward the hall. The light switch yielded only a sputtering, hesitant glow from the bulb. I stood motionless, straining my ears. Near the corridor's terminus loomed the sealed portal to the attic. From its vicinity, the whispers seemed to emanate, dissolving the instant my proximity registered. No true strangeness settled upon me then, merely the low-grade unease of shadows and unfamiliarity. Gazing at the closed hatch etched into the ceiling, a fleeting coolness traced my skin before I retreated to the bedroom, chalking the incident up to fatigue, perhaps imagination's phantom limb. Dawn arrived, and with it, a conscious effort to banish the nocturnal murmur. Unpacking proceeded. Shelves found their purchase against living room walls. Lunch materialized in the novel kitchen space. I took a quiet pleasure in the antiquated fixtures, the sink's intricately wrought brass handles, the vast pantry exuding the dry perfume of aged timber. Ordinariness reigned until the late afternoon light began to slant. Reclining on the sofa, idly navigating the digital currents of my phone, the whispers returned. That same indistinct summons, my name breathed into the air. It lingered, an echo held for 2 heartbeats, then vanished. A phantom current seemed to traverse the room, though every window remained secured. I rose, prowled the perimeter, verified the locks. Nothing amiss. The sound possessed no discernible point of origin, yet its locus felt persistently, unsettlingly upstairs. Exploration became imperative. Armed with a torch, I confronted the attic stairs. The hatch resisted, its hinges stiff with disuse, demanding more leverage than anticipated. Each riser groaned a loud protest under my weight. Cresting the top step, I plunged into an abrupt pocket of cold, not frigid, but a stark demarcation from the warmth below. The air hung thick, stale with the scent of dormant dust. Detritus littered the expanse. Skeletal remains of chairs, forgotten tools scattered like fallen soldiers, cartons slumped in weary piles, and dominating the far wall, a substantial trunk. A lone naked bulb cast a weak circle of light, leaving the corners steeped in shadow. I stood surveying the scene, my breath catching, a constricting band tightening around my chest. My forearms prickled, gooseflesh rising along the nape of my neck. Again a sound, or the ghost of one, like the faintest exhalation. My torch beam stabbed into the nearest corner. Stillness. Drawn by an unnamed curiosity, I approached the trunk. Its lid defied my attempts. A lock held it fast. A tentative shake produced a muffled thud from within, the sound of dense weight shifting. My heart began a frantic tattoo against my ribs, accompanied by a nascent, illogical dread. No rational cause presented itself, only this profound disquiet. Then, the unmistakable creak of floorboards under pressure. I spun, light beams slashing through the gloom. Vacancy, a difficult swallow. Hello? My voice, thin and unsteady, seemed an indecent violation of the silence. No reply came. Retreating, I felt half persuaded I was merely weaving my own tapestry of fear. That night, the whispers shed their ambiguity, gaining volume. While brushing my teeth, the sound surfaced again, clearer this time. Leo, it hissed, intimate and sharp. My pulse leaped. I expelled toothpaste, silenced the gushing faucet. The house held its breath. Pushing open the bathroom door, I peered down the shadowed corridor, listening with an intensity that bordered on pain. It came again. Leo. The syllables stretched, distorted. A glacial chill traced my spine. My hand developed a tremor. I bolted to my bedroom, slammed the door, fumbled the lamp into brightness. Perched on the edge of the bed, heart hammering, I battled for composure, feeding myself rationalizations, settling foundations, drafts through ancient walls. Yet the certainty of what I'd heard resonated deep within my bones. Morning spurred me to action. A visit to a local electronics emporium yielded a rudimentary security system. One lens I positioned in the hallway, its unblinking eye fixed on the attic hatch. Another found its place within the attic itself, trained on the enigmatic trunk and the deepest recess of shadow. Continuous recording engaged. A sliver of absurdity pricked me. Was this not an overreaction, but the need for objective evidence for proof against intrusion or delusion overruled my embarrassment? The day unfolded in deceptive tranquility. Dinner prepared, television watched. A conscious suppression of the attic's unsettling presence. Later, seated before my computer, I began the tedious review of the captured footage. Hours scrolled by, revealing nothing beyond the mundane. The attic camera displayed a static tableau of dust motes dancing in faint light. The hallway feed documented my own passage, flicking switches, entering and exiting rooms. No trespassers, no spectral anomalies. Relief warred with lingering unease. Perhaps I was merely suggestible. Then my gaze fell upon the audio waveforms. The software mapped erratic spikes in sound occurring at random intervals. Playing back one such segment yielded only a low hum of static, but amplifying the volume to its threshold revealed something else. A strange, deep murmur, indecipherable, buried beneath the noise. Straining, pressing headphones hard against my ears, I listened again. Through the sonic sludge, my own name seemed to struggle for coherence. A jolt, cold and sharp, shot through me. The video showed empty space, yet the microphone had captured something. I meticulously noted the time codes, saving the relevant files. Sleep offered no refuge that night. I thrashed in the sheets, tormented by visions of the space above. Around 2 a.m, a dream took hold. I stood within the attic, paralyzed, while a figure clad in a severe black suit occupied the far corner, untouched by the meager light. He remained utterly still, silent. His features swam, refusing to resolve into focus. My feet felt leaden, welded to the floorboards. Escape was impossible. My gaze was captive. I awoke violently, drenched in sweat, breath tearing raggedly from my lungs, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. A glance at my phone confirmed the time. 2:10 a.m. Wiping perspiration from my brow with a sleeve, I fought for calm, eventually succumbing to a shallow, troubled doze. The following day, I ventured back into the attic. Daylight, filtering through the grimy panes of small windows, softened the space, rendering it less overtly menacing. Yet, the moment I ascended, my skin tightened, prickling with residual dread. The image of the man in the black suit superimposed itself onto the shadowed corner. I returned to the trunk. The lock, ancient and tinged with rust, resisted my tugging and impatient jerks. Breaking it seemed the only recourse, but the necessary tools were downstairs. I turned my attention to the scattered boxes. Most gaped empty. One yielded brittle newspapers dated from the 1960s. Another contained a fractured lamp and a clutch of tarnished silverware. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing to illuminate the source of the voices. The remainder of the day I devoted to improving the attic's illumination. The single inadequate bulb was supplanted by a brighter, more efficient LED fixture. I swept the dusty floor, shoved the trunk flush against the wall, attempted a semblance of order amongst the clutter. A desperate bid for control, perhaps. Throughout this labor, a persistent tightness gripped my chest, an unnerving anticipation of the whispers resuming at any moment. My nerves stretched taut as piano wire, yet the attic remained stubbornly silent during my efforts. Nightfall brought another review of the camera feeds. As before, the visual record remained stubbornly inert. The audio, however, consistently displayed those aberrant spikes. Listening intently to several segments, I again discerned the low, churning murmur beneath the static. A wave of nausea washed over me. Shutting down the computer, I sought refuge in the mindless glow of the television, hoping for drowsiness. Around midnight, I finally moved toward bed, leaving the hallway light burning, a small concession to the encroaching darkness. Sleep claimed me swiftly, only to plunge me back into the recurring nightmare. The man in the black suit stood closer this time, mere steps away. His silhouette was stark, definitive, yet his face remained obscured by shadow. My dream heart raced, pummeled by the insistent whispered repetition of my name. I surfaced to the sound of my own indistinct mumbling, arms rigid, jaw aching from unconscious clenching. Sitting bolt upright, I stared into the bedroom's darkness, pierced only by the thin blade of light beneath the door. No whispers now, but the oppressive sensation of being observed lingered. Rising, I opened the door, scanned the empty hallway. Compelled, I checked the attic hatch. Closed, secure. Locking my bedroom door offered scant comfort. Sleep remained elusive, my eyes fixed on the shadows for a long, tense interval. The next morning, I phoned a friend, fabricating a story about potential vermin in the attic. The whispers, the dream, these remained unspoken burdens. Together, we conducted a thorough search, examining rafters and corners for any sign of animal intrusion. Droppings, nests, points of entry. We discovered nothing. The space was sealed, undisturbed. My friend offered a jesting diagnosis. Maybe you're haunted. A forced chuckle escaped me, tasting like ash. After his departure, I sat immobile at the kitchen table, nursing cold coffee, my hands betraying a fine tremor, my stomach clenched tight. My gaze drifted upward towards the ceiling, picturing the unseen beams, the dust, the locked trunk presiding over the space above. The house itself felt sentient, possessed of a retentive memory. Subsequent nights were dedicated to amassing further evidence. Audio recorders were deployed in various rooms. The harvest was consistent. More inexplicable sounds, always faint, always sporadic. Occasionally, amidst the murmurs, fragments of words seemed to coalesce. Come closer. Stay. Was it genuine or merely my stressed psyche projecting patterns onto chaos? The uncertainty gnawed at me. My appetite dwindled. Every creak of the old house sent jolts through my system. Nightly rituals now included double-checking locks. The dreams persisted, unchanging. The static figure in the suit, perpetually inhabiting the attic's darkest verge. After a week besieged by this invisible disturbance, resolve hardened. The trunk held the key. I felt it instinctively. A trip to the hardware store procured a crowbar. Ascending the attic stairs, my heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing the dread coiling in my gut. The air felt weighted, cloying. Positioning a flashlight on a small stool to illuminate the target, I wedged the tip of the crowbar beneath the trunk's stubborn latch. Metal groaned against metal. With a surge of effort, the lock fractured with a sharp crack. The lid protested with a prolonged creak as I heaved it open. Inside lay a collection of relics, garments yellowed with age, a pair of worn leather shoes, letters bundled with a fragile cord, and nestled amongst them, a small photograph in a plain wooden frame. Black and white, it depicted a man in a formal black suit. His face remained indistinct, partially obscured, yet the posture, the very shape of him, resonated chillingly with the figure haunting my dreams. My throat constricted, a tremor ran through my hands as I held the image. Setting it carefully aside, I sifted through the clothes. They released a musty odor, the scent of decades sealed away. The shoes were scuffed, heels worn down. The letters, penned in an elegant looping cursive, proved difficult to decipher. The ink faded, portions illegible. They spoke of the house, of time passing, but offered no clear narrative. My mind raced, fixated on the man in the photograph, his stiff formality, the absence of a smile. The background hinted at the attic itself, though details were obscured. I returned everything to the trunk, save the photograph. Clasping it, staring into the faded image, I felt it again. That prickling awareness on the back of my neck, the distinct sensation of presence directly behind me. I whirled around. Nothing. Just the dust motes swirling in the flashlight beam. I descended from the attic, a strange dizziness clouding my senses. The nightmares intensified, their frequency increasing. The man in the suit never spoke, never moved, merely stood, an unwavering sentinel, his unseen gaze fixed upon me. The following day, I sought distraction in household repairs, replacing loose floorboards, silencing a dripping faucet, sweeping the front porch. Mundane tasks offered temporary grounding, yet my nerves remained frayed. In unguarded moments, my eyes would flick upward towards the ceiling, half expecting, half dreading a glimpse of something. By night, the voices seemed bolder, louder, as if seeping through the very plaster of the walls. I sat in the living room, bathing the space in artificial light, and listened. It was a constant, sibilant undertone, like breath shaping my name over and over. A primal urge to flee, to drive away into the night, warred with a stubborn refusal to yield. My chest remained tight, scalp tingling, hands cold and clammy. I pushed back against the rising tide of fear, repeating the mantra, just a house, old wood, strange acoustics, but a deeper conviction whispered otherwise. I began addressing the empty air, demanding, "What do you want?" Silence answered, followed by the insidious return of the whisper, "Leo." In desperation, I tried television again, cranking the volume, but the whispered intrusion slid beneath the dialogue, an unnerving counterpoint. Slamming my hands onto the coffee table, I shouted, "Stop!" The susurrus paused for a breath, then resumed its relentless rhythm. Helplessness washed over me. One final time, I turned to the camera recordings. Scrutinizing every frame from the attic feed, I saw only the familiar stillness, the dance of dust. The audio track remained a tapestry of static, then a flicker, an anomaly. For a single frame, the texture of the static seemed to coalesce, forming a darker patch. Advancing frame by painstaking frame, a silhouette emerged in the corner, indistinct yet undeniably matching the form of the man from my dreams, from the photograph. A fleeting presence there and gone in an instant. My hand trembled on the mouse. Panic tightened its icy grip around my heart. The next frame, empty space. I replayed the sequence repeatedly, verifying. The ephemeral shadow remained consistent. Saving the clip, I shut down the computer, consumed by a profound tremor. My legs felt weak, unreliable. Sinking into my chair, I stared at the blank screen. The silhouette seared onto my retinas. It was him. The presence I felt, the source of the whispers calling me to the attic. He was there, just beyond the veil of perception. My phone buzzed, the sudden sound nearly launching me from the chair. A friend, inquiring about my settling-in process. I offered hollow assurances, unwilling to voice the truth, fearing dismissal or disbelief. Sleep that night was a fragmented affair. Each creak of the house seemed amplified, pregnant with meaning. The wind rattling the window panes sounded like grasping fingers. Around 3 in the morning, I rose and walked the length of the hallway, coming to a stop directly beneath the attic hatch. Staring up at it, heart pounding a heavy cadence, I reached out, my fingertips brushing the cool metal of the latch. A powerful urge to open it warred with an equally potent dread. The air around the hatch felt unnaturally cold, raising the fine hairs on my arm. "What do you want?" I whispered into the oppressive silence. No answer came. My throat felt parched, my mouth stale. After a long moment, hand still hovering, I retreated to my room. I remain in this house. The thought of leaving surfaces often, yet the finality of ownership anchors me here. Abandonment feels like surrender. My days are now spent trying to unravel the enigma woven into the fabric of this place. The cameras continue their vigil. The recordings are my daily ritual. Sometimes within the whispers, I fancy I discern new words, their emotional tenor shifting between anger and sorrow. The man in the black suit is a fixture in my dreams, eternally stationed in his shadowed corner, half hidden, beckoning. Every ascent into the attic knots my stomach. A permanent tension resides in my shoulders. Why this entity has fixed upon me, why it clings to the shadows, remains unknown. But a grim determination has taken root alongside the fear. I must understand. This house holds secrets entwined with the trunk, the photograph, and the pervasive whispers that haunt its halls. I live perpetually on edge, anxiety a constant companion manifesting in the frantic jump of my pulse at a sudden noise, the stiffness in my muscles, the quickening breath each time I climb those stairs. Something is here, something that demands acknowledgement, and escape is no longer an option. This is my house now. I must confront whatever lurks in the darkness.